Men were not forged to live in safety, they were forged to fight. Comfort is the gilded prison where the spirit dies a slow death. The greatest lie ever whispered to mankind is that constant protection equals true peace. It does not. It is the anesthetic of the soul, dulling the edges that make you dangerous, that make you whole. Look upon the soft hands of the civilized and see the cost of their high walls. This is the ultimate lesson of Cimmeria. Those who seek only shelter will find their strength eroded by the very refuge they crave. They become reliant, brittle, waiting for the system that promises them safety to inevitably collapse and crush them underneath its weight. Conan knew this truth in his bones long before he saw the vast empires crumble. He understood that true security is not found in stone fortifications, but in the honed capability of the self. Stay until the end, and you will understand why seeking constant safety is the first step toward irreversible weakness. Beyond the jagged, frost-bitten peaks of Cimmeria, the world of men has built sprawling, arrogant empires. They surround themselves with polished granite and iron gates, believing that layers of bureaucracy and high walls somehow equate to immortality. This is the context of the modern world, a grand experiment in managed fragility. Look closely at the inhabitants of these shielded metropolises. They are well-fed, educated, and perpetually anxious. Their bodies, shielded from the sun and the raw wind, have forgotten the language of endurance. Their minds, constantly supplied with distractions and pre-digested truths, have forgotten how to wrestle with uncertainty. The system is elegant in its cruelty. It does not attack directly, it seduces. It offers efficiency in exchange for independence. It offers medical reassurance in exchange for physical hardiness. It trades the existential necessity of violence, the honest confrontation with death that sharpens the spirit, for a docile, consumerist existence. Conan saw this atrophy not just in the soft bellies of the merchants, but in the brittle faith of their soldiers, who fought not for freedom, but for a salary and a pension. They are men who have outsourced their defense, their food production, and their very will to the collective structure. They have forgotten that true wealth lies not in accumulation, but in resilience. When the walls inevitably breach, whether by economic collapse, plague, or the iron fist of a true tyrant, these protected men will not rise up. They will shatter because their entire existence has been predicated on the impossible promise that nothing truly dangerous will ever touch them. They have traded their birthright, the savage strength of self-reliance, for a lifetime spent waiting in line. The anomaly is the modern man's visceral terror of discomfort. This fear is not natural. It is the engineered outcome of generations spent optimizing away every potential friction point. We see the incident not as a sudden collapse, but as a slow, corrosive poisoning. Imagine a warrior, clad in heavy mail, standing guard for 20 years without ever drawing his blade in earnest. When the real charge comes, his muscles will seize, his reactions will be sluggish, and his armor will be nothing more than a heavy coffin. The civilized world suffers from this exact paralysis. They worship convenience, a minor inconvenience, a broken supply chain, a power outage, a moment of true physical strain, sends them spiraling into panic. Their crisis management involves finding someone else to solve the problem, usually through a glowing rectangle or a centralized authority. They have lost the fundamental human skill of improvisation under duress. Conan, moving through the soft underbelly of these kingdoms, often witnessed the breakdown firsthand. A simple drought, which would have meant a few hard weeks and creative hunting for his people, triggered riots and mass starvation in opulent cities. Why? Because the city dwellers had relied on a fragile, complex web of infrastructure, never learning to forage, never learning to hoard efficiently, never learning to kill their own meat. Their dependency became the weapon turned against them. Their safety was the lie. The incident reveals the terrifying fragility beneath the polished surface. This deep-seated fragility is the true crime of excessive civilization. The majority, steeped in the delusion of perpetual progress and safety nets, treat Stoicism as a quaint philosophy, a mental trick for coping with traffic, perhaps. They dismiss the harsh truths of the barbarian as simple savagery. They believe that through enough rules, enough social engineering, and enough money, they can truly eliminate suffering and randomness. They see the man who prepares for catastrophe, the man who embraces physical hardship, not as prudent, but as obsessive or paranoid. They resist the notion that suffering is a necessary forge. When disaster strikes, they do not accept the consequence. They demand compensation, accountability, and the swift return of their comfort. Their skepticism is rooted in entitlement, the belief that the universe owes them ease. But the reality, according to the unforgiving mathematics of survival, is brutal. Every time the soft man avoids the cold, avoids the strain, avoids the conflict, he is paying a hidden tax on his future resilience. Conan knew that muscles not used atrophy. The mind not forced to confront death becomes terrified of life. The civilized man mocks the barbarian's apparent lack of sophistication, yet the barbarian possesses the ultimate sophistication, the complete and ruthless mastery of self-reliance. He does not need the city council, the insurance broker, or the police force to survive Tuesday. He is his own infrastructure. The cogs of the empire might turn smoothly for decades, but the moment they seize, the protected majority will stand exposed and helpless, relying on systems that have already failed. Their asceticism is their executioner. The method is simple, brutal, and ancient: voluntary hardship. This is the Conan strategy applied to the Stoic doctrine. The average man waits for pain to find him. The warrior seeks it out on his own terms, mastering it before it can master him. This is not self-flagellation. It is preventative inoculation against weakness. How does one apply this autopsy of comfort? By systematically reintroducing friction into an artificially frictionless life. Start with the physical. The cold shower when the body craves warmth, the long march when the carriage is available, the heavy lift when the body is tired. These deliberate stresses teach the biological apparatus that discomfort is temporary and survivable. The goal is to build a body that takes commands from the will, not from the environment. Next, the mental and emotional. The controlled confrontation with uncertainty. The civilized man avoids difficult conversations, avoids the potential for failure, avoids financial risk. The Conan methodology demands the opposite. Engage the conflicts. Take the calculated risk. Do the hard thing precisely because it is hard and offers no immediate reward. Each successful confrontation, no matter how small, a night spent sleeping rough, a hunger pang ignored, a truth spoken despite the cost, is a deposit in the resilience bank. This strategy forces adaptation. The soft man optimizes for comfort, the hard man optimizes for survival. When the unpredictable hammer of fate descends, the soft man breaks, the hard man bends, absorbs the shock, and strikes back. The methodology is not about aggression, it is about absolute self-contained competence. The first revelation is the rediscovery of internal authority. The moment a man chooses voluntary suffering, he seizes back control that was silently handed over to the system. When Conan rejected the velvet robes of civilization for the chainmail and the open road, he wasn't running from comfort. He was claiming autonomy. In the language of Stoicism, this is the radical acceptance of the dichotomy of control. Most men spend their lives desperately trying to control external factors, the economy, other people's opinions, the weather. This futile effort drains their psychic energy. The warrior flips the equation. He accepts the chaos of the outside world, the barbarians at the gate, the sudden storm, the market crash, as inevitable background noise. The control is redirected inward. The only true territory is the mind, the body, and the immediate capacity for action. This redirection is the proof of concept. When a man masters his own hunger during a fast, he realizes that the grocery store, though convenient, does not hold the leash to his survival. When he pushes his body past a perceived limit, he realizes the limits were psychological constructs built by years of ease. This internal power is an asset that cannot be taxed, confiscated, or destroyed by any emperor or natural disaster. It is the ultimate insurance policy. When every external system fails, the self-governed man still stands, fueled not by hope, but by demonstrated competence. This competence is the only thing that truly separates the master from the slave in the brutal reality of the world. It is the proof that the lie of comfort has been rejected. Why does voluntary hardship function as a superior training mechanism? Because it operates directly against the brain's default setting for conservation. Survival requires energy efficiency, so the body attempts to make every task easier. Civilization reinforces this tendency until the man becomes maximally adapted to a perfectly smooth, predictable environment. The mechanics of this reversal involve a concept known as hormesis, the principle that exposure to low doses of something harmful, stress, is beneficial. Cold exposure triggers mitochondrial biogenesis, making the body a more efficient energy engine. Fasting clears cellular waste and optimizes metabolic function. Intense, goal-oriented physical strain rebuilds bone density and mental fortitude simultaneously. Conan did not study the biology, but he lived the results. He understood that the hard ground was a better teacher than the softest mattress. The necessity of the fight sharpens the senses and accelerates decision-making under stress. This process inoculates against the catastrophic psychological shutdown that paralyzes the modern man when faced with genuine, unfiltered chaos. Furthermore, this practice dismantles the expectation of comfort. The man who expects ease will react with outrage and despair when ease is removed. The man who regularly chooses difficulty has already paid the emotional toll. When forced difficulty arrives, it is merely an increase in intensity, not a fundamental violation of his worldview. The hard man's baseline of tolerance is so high that he registers threats the soft man finds incapacitating as merely annoyances. This optimization for adversity is the true currency of strength. The consequence of ignoring this ancient truth is predictable. The soft man, when his world fractures, will be consumed by his own fear. His inability to tolerate minimal discomfort scales up into an inability to survive genuine hardship. When the power grid fails, his meticulously climate-controlled apartment becomes a tomb of his own making. When the markets crash, his confidence, built on external projections of wealth, vaporizes. The historical record is littered with the corpses of civilizations that optimized for pleasure over resilience. Rome did not fall overnight to external armies. It decayed from within, choked by its own self-indulgence and dependency on state provision. The moment the supply lines tightened, the legions grew weak, and the populace lost the will to sacrifice. The end was mathematically certain. This is the grim consequence. Perpetual, low-grade anxiety replaced by catastrophic, paralyzing terror. The man who habitually avoids the gym because it is hard is the same man who will panic when he has to sprint for his life. The mind, trained to avoid minor pain, treats extreme pain as an existential affront, shutting down rational response. To ignore voluntary hardship is to sign a contract with fate that demands maximum payment when the bill comes due. You will not face disaster with a honed edge. You will face it with a nervous whimper and the vain hope that someone else will solve your problem. And when that hope fails, as it always does, you become not a survivor, but just another liability, a victim waiting for the inevitable axe. The second mystery, the deeper challenge that Conan confronted, was not merely surviving the external chaos, but maintaining the inner discipline in the absence of an immediate threat. It is easy to be tough when the enemy is visible and the hunger is real. The true test of the warrior is finding the grit to train when the sun is shining and the pantry is full. This is the difference between reaction and mastery. The constant low-grade pressure of safety creates a different kind of danger, complacency disguised as stability. When life is easy, the mind drifts into frivolous pursuits, the body slackens, and the edge dulls. This quiet erosion is the most dangerous form of attack because it is self-inflicted and celebrated by the surrounding culture. The challenge is to institute and maintain the self-imposed austerity measures, the discipline that seems unnecessary in the moment. It is lifting the heavy stone not because you need to crush an enemy today, but because you might need to lift the weight of the world tomorrow. It is maintaining financial and physical reserves not for the promised vacation, but for the guaranteed disaster. This internal regulation is what separates the merely reactive survivor from the philosophical warrior. The survivor prepares for the known threat, a specific war, a defined economic downturn. The warrior, guided by the Stoic principle of premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils, prepares for any threat, understanding that randomness rules and the unimaginable is inevitable. His primary asset is not his stored food, but the absolute constant readiness of his mind and body. The soft collapse of the modern era is merely the latest echo of a historical pattern as old as Sumer. Look at the grand image. The cycle always begins with the fierce, self-sufficient tribe that conquers nature and establishes order through force and competence. The second phase is the establishment of the empire, where that competence is codified into law and outsourced to institutions. The third phase is the era of refinement and comfort, where the descendants, having never paid the price for the original order, begin to believe that comfort is the natural state of existence. This is where we stand now. The collective memory of true scarcity and unmitigated violence has faded, replaced by historical textbooks and sanitized media. We are living in the fat years, consuming the resilience debt accrued by our ancestors. Conan, moving across the vast sweep of Hyperborean history, saw these civilizations as temporary sandcastles, defined by the inevitability of their erosion. Every city, no matter how magnificent its libraries or how secure its treasury, was destined to return to dust if its people stopped actively maintaining their personal competence. The connection is brutal. Dependency scales. When the population depends on the central bank, on the centralized food distribution, and on the state for protection, the failure of that single node causes total systemic failure. The scattered, decentralized tribes, the Cimmerians, the Picts, the true barbarians, they survive the crash because their survival protocols are redundant and inherent in every single member. They are individual operating units, not soft components of a fragile machine. The legacy of the civilized collapse is always the same. Ruins used as shelter by the hard men who survived the reckoning. What remains in the aftermath of a comfort-driven society is not prosperity, but fragmented pockets of primal knowledge. The ability to start fire without electricity, the skill to treat a wound without a sterile hospital, the psychological fortitude to execute the necessary violence. The men who embrace the lie of constant protection leave behind no legacy but a warning etched in stone rubble. Strength delegated is strength lost. The future, for those who choose the harder path now, is sovereignty. Not sovereignty of nations, but sovereignty of the self. This means accepting that chaos is the default state of the universe, and order must be violently imposed and constantly maintained, starting with your own internal landscape. Conan did not seek to rebuild empires. He sought freedom, which is defined by the absence of dependency. When the city falls, the man who only knows how to navigate the city dies with it. The barbarian, however, finds new hunting grounds in the ruins because his competence transcends location and structure. Your legacy is not the comfort you accumulated, but the hardship you mastered. When the safety nets are cut, and they will be, what remains is the raw, undeniable capability you forged in the quiet hours of voluntary suffering. That is the only inheritance that matters. So here is the hard truth, stripped bare like bone left on the battlefield. You have been lied to. The promise of perpetual security is the trap that catches the weakest spirits. The system does not want you strong. Strength is ungovernable. It wants you dependent, anxious, and predictable. The path of the warrior, the path of the stoic, demands a radical re-evaluation of what constitutes a good life. It is not a life without hardship, but a life where hardship is deliberately sought and overcome. Your duty is to cultivate resilience as your primary asset. Seek the cold, embrace the fast, take the hard road. If you recognize this atrophy in your own life, the soft edges, the quick panic, the reliance on external solutions, then today is the day you begin the resistance. Do not wait for the inevitable crisis to teach you the painful lesson. Start preparing your mind and body now, while the consequences of failure are still manageable. The price of convenience is always freedom. Choose the friction, choose the pain, choose to be dangerous. Because in the end, when the empires have crumbled and the soft men weep for their lost comfort, the only thing that answers the question, what is best in life, is the strength you built yourself. Share this with those who still cling to the gilded bars of the cage. Let the weak stay soft, but you must become stone.